The water of Lake Baikal is ancient, older than the continents themselves, a crystal blue abyss that has watched empires rise and fall. Yet beneath its frozen surface lies a secret that has haunted scientists and locals for generations. What lies beneath the frozen depths of Baikal? As winter tightens its grip and a brittle crust of ice seals the lake, the world above falls silent, but below, a restless darkness stirs. For centuries, the indigenous Buryat people whispered of the black water, a place where the lake's heart beats with a rhythm unlike any river or sea. Early explorers noted strange magnetic anomalies that made compasses spin, and sonar sweeps returned echoes of massive, perfectly circular formations hidden in the mud-laden trench that runs the lake's length. Some describe these as stone monoliths, standing like sentinels, their surfaces polished by time, their purpose indecipherable. In the 1970s, a Soviet research team drilled a borehole to a depth of 640 meters, reaching the lake's deepest point. The core samples revealed layers of sediment that should have been impossible to preserve, organics dating back 6 million years, alive in a state of frozen stasis. Embedded within the ice were microscopic organisms that thrive without sunlight, feeding on chemicals leached from the lakebed. Yet the most chilling find came when a submersible, equipped with a low-light camera, captured a faint, pulsing glow emanating from the trench's floor. The light flickered in a pattern reminiscent of a heartbeat, and the camera's footage showed an undulating shape, too large to be a fish, too fluid to be rock. Theories abound. Some scientists argue the glow is a rare chemiluminescent bacterium, a natural byproduct of the lake's high methane concentrations. Others, more speculative, suggest a hidden cavern filled with ancient, perhaps even pre-Cambrian life forms, remnants of a world that predates the ice itself. Local legends tell of a guardian that sleeps beneath the lake, awakened only when the ice cracks and the world above forgets the old stories. Even the lake's own water chemistry adds to the mystery. Baikal contains more than 20% of the planet's unfrozen freshwater, yet its oxygen levels at depth remain inexplicably high, allowing complex ecosystems to thrive where darkness should dominate. Measurements taken near the anomalous trench show spikes of an unknown isotope, a signature that does not match any known earthly element. The unanswered questions echo across the frozen plain each spring when the ice melts, exposing strange, perfectly round depressions in the shoreline, holes where the water seems to recede, as if something below has drawn it in. Are these merely the result of thermal currents, or do they mark the breathing of something vast and unseen? We stand at the edge of a mystery that is both scientific and mythic. The lake invites us to stare into its abyss, promising that beneath the ice, something ancient, perhaps even sentient, watches, waiting for the day when humanity finally uncovers its true nature. Until then, the frozen depths of Lake Baikal keep their secret, and the question remains, what truly lies beneath? What if a desert, endless as night, could grow a forest of stone, towers that seem to sprout from the sand, each one a perfect, impossible geometry, defying the very rules of erosion? The Sahara's stone forest whispers a paradox that has haunted geologists and explorers for decades, a place where nature appears to have written its own secret code in limestone and sandstone. The first reports emerged in the early 20th century, when French military cartographers, mapping the desolate Erg-Chech, stumbled upon a field of monolithic pillars rising like ancient sentinels. Their surfaces are smooth, their edges razor-sharp, some standing over 30 meters tall, their tops crowned with delicate, mushroom-like caps that seem to have been polished by an unseen hand. From a distance, the forest looks almost artificial, as if a forgotten civilization had carved the rocks with a purpose now lost to the ages. Scientists have proposed several explanations, each more unsettling than the last. One theory suggests that the pillars are the remnants of a massive, prehistoric lake that once covered this part of the Sahara. When the lake evaporated, mineral-rich waters precipitated layers of calcite, later hardened into massive columns. Yet the uniformity of the shapes and the absence of typical lakebed sediment challenge this hypothesis. Another idea points to wind erosion, ventifacts sculpted by relentless sandstorms over millions of years. The Sahara's ferocious gales can indeed sand polish stone, but they usually produce irregular, wind-blown streaks, not the almost perfect symmetry seen here. Adding to the mystery, some researchers have identified faint, rhythmic patterns etched into the stone surfaces, tiny, regularly spaced pits that could be the result of a natural process or perhaps an ancient, ritualistic marking. Local Tuareg legends speak of the stones that drink the sky, believing the pillars to be the petrified remains of giants who once roamed the desert, turned to stone by a curse for daring to defy the sun. While folklore offers no scientific proof, it underscores how deeply the phenomenon has seeped into human imagination. What truly remains unanswered is the timing. Radiometric dating of the surrounding sand suggests the forest formed somewhere between 30,000 and 10,000 years ago, a period when the Sahara oscillated between lush grasslands and harsh desert. If the pillars emerged during a greener epoch, could an unknown climatic event have triggered a rapid, massive mineral deposition? Or did an unknown, perhaps even extraterrestrial, factor intervene, leaving behind a monument that refuses to fit within any known geological framework? The stone forest stands silent, its shadows stretching across the dunes at dusk, as if guarding a secret older than civilization itself. Each pillar is a question mark, each gust of wind a reminder that our planet still holds riddles beyond our comprehension. And as the sun sinks, the desert air grows cold, the stones seem to pulse with an ancient rhythm, leaving us to wonder. Are we merely observers of a natural marvel, or have we stumbled upon a relic of a forgotten world that once dared to shape the very earth? What if a stone from a world long dead held a glimpse of a sky that would not appear for another 2,000 years? Deep in the remote highlands of the Anatolian Plateau, archaeologists unearthed a small, weather-worn slab of limestone that immediately set every scholar's pulse racing. Carved into its surface, with the painstaking precision of a Bronze Age artisan, is an image that seems impossibly out of place. A sleek, elongated shape soaring above a jagged ridge, its wings spread like the wings of a mythic bird, a tail fin ending in a distinctive vertical stabilizer. The figure is unmistakably reminiscent of a modern jet aircraft, a design that would not be conceived until the 20th century. The slab, dated by thermoluminescence to roughly 1,800 BCE, was found within a burial mound belonging to the Hatti culture, a people whose rituals and iconography remain only partially understood. Around the enigmatic aircraft, there are additional motifs, stylized clouds, concentric circles that could represent propellers, and a series of linear symbols that some researchers suggest might be an early form of notation. No comparable depictions exist in any known Bronze Age repertoire. The nearest analogues are crude bird sketches or mythic beasts, never machines. Scholars have proposed several theories, each more unsettling than the last. One hypothesis argues that the carving is a later intrusion, a modern vandal's prank misstated by the surrounding matrix. Yet the surrounding soil layers, the patina on the incisions, and the fact that the slab was still embedded in an undisturbed burial chamber all point to authenticity. Another, more speculative idea suggests that the image is a symbolic representation of a celestial phenomenon, perhaps a comet or a meteoric fireball, interpreted through the limited visual vocabulary of the time. Yet the geometry of the wings, the straight trailing edge, and the hint of a cockpit canopy resist such natural explanations. What truly chills the marrow is the recurring pattern found in other, geographically distant sites. In a remote cave near the Carpathian foothills, a petroglyph from a similar era shows a round disc with 3 radiating lines, eerily similar to a propeller. In a bronze pendant from the Levant, a tiny embossed figure bears an uncanny resemblance to an aircraft silhouette. These isolated echoes could be coincidence, or they might hint at a shared, forgotten visual language that somehow captured an image of technology that would only become reality centuries later. The mystery deepens when you consider the cultural context. The Hatti people worshipped sky deities, and their funerary rites often involved offerings meant to guide souls to the heavens. Could this carving be an early, metaphorical attempt to depict a divine messenger, a vehicle that could bridge earth and sky? Or does it betray a fleeting, inexplicable glimpse of a future that the ancients could not comprehend? Until a definitive answer emerges, the limestone slab remains a silent witness to a paradox that defies linear time. It stands as a reminder that the past may hold fragments of knowledge far beyond its own horizon, waiting for us to decipher them. And as the wind whistles through the Anatolian crags, one cannot help but wonder. Did our ancestors truly see an aircraft soaring above their world? Or are we merely projecting our modern imagination onto the stone? The answer, like the faint outline of that ancient wing, fades into the shadows of history, leaving us with a lingering sense of unease. Deep in the endless sweep of the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, legends have whispered of a city swallowed by the desert, a kingdom of incense and gold that vanished without a trace. What was Ubar, mythic oasis of the Quraysh, the fabled Atlantis of the sands, or merely a mirage conjured by thirsty caravans? The story begins in the 9th century Arabic poem Kitab al-Maqdisiyah, where travelers speak of a thriving port on the edge of a forgotten sea, a hub for frankincense that stretched its fragrant trade to the great empires of Egypt and Rome. Archaeologists and explorers have chased that ghost for centuries. In 1992, a joint Saudi-UAE expedition, guided by satellite imagery and the ancient writings of Ibn Battuta, uncovered the ruins of a massive stone complex near the village of Shisr. Massive walls, a collapsed tower, and a network of canals, an engineering feat that suggests a once flourishing settlement, not a fleeting oasis. Pottery shards, copper tools, and carbon-dated timber point to a habitation period between the 3rd and 6th centuries CE, aligning with the height of the incense trade. Yet doubts linger. Some scholars argue that the stone structures belong to a Bedouin fortress rather than an opulent metropolis. Others note that the desert's shifting dunes can bury entire valleys in a single storm, turning any trace of a city into a silent, sandy tomb. The lack of written records from Ubar itself, no inscriptions, no royal decrees, means that every piece of evidence must be read through the prism of external accounts, each colored by the traveler's own agendas. And then there is the most unsettling clue: a series of ancient, weather-worn basalt blocks bearing a strange, repeating pattern of intersecting lines. Some propose a primitive script, others a decorative motif, but none have been conclusively deciphered. If those marks are indeed a form of writing, they could be the only voice of a people whose very name has been erased by the wind. So the question remains, hanging over the dunes like a heat shimmer: was Ubar a real, thriving city whose fate was sealed by a sudden shift in the water table, a catastrophic sandstorm that buried it whole, or is it an elaborate legend, a cautionary tale about the hubris of empire? The desert keeps its secrets close, and as the sun sets, the horizon seems to swallow the ruins once more, leaving us to wonder whether the city ever truly existed, or whether it lives forever as a phantom, a whisper carried on the endless gusts of the empty quarter. The water of the lake glitters like liquid rubies, a crimson sheen that seems to swallow the sky at dusk. Travelers who stumble upon its shore swear the air itself tastes of iron, and the very surface shivers with an unsettling pulse, as if the lake were breathing. This is Red Lake, a remote basin cradled high in the Carpathian foothills, known to locals for centuries as Krvavi Ozero. Its name, whispered in the same breath as legends of cursed warriors and ancient rites, begs a question that still haunts scientists. Is the blood-red hue the work of a hidden toxin, or does it arise from a natural alchemy that defies our understanding? First recorded by a 16th century monk, the lake's hue was described as the color of fresh drawn blood, impossible to mask even by the fiercest storm. When modern explorers arrived in the 1970s, they brought spectrometers and water samples, hoping to isolate a chemical culprit. Their analysis revealed unusually high concentrations of iron oxide, but the levels alone could not account for the intensity of the color. In some tests, the water turned even darker after exposure to sunlight, suggesting a photochemical reaction at play. One theory, put forward by a handful of geochemists, proposes that the lake sits atop a vast deposit of pyrite, fool's gold, whose slow oxidation leaches iron into the water, while certain bacteria metabolize the metal, producing a deep, almost opaque ferric compound. Yet the lake's temperature remains near freezing, a condition that should stifle bacterial activity, and the surrounding rocks show no sign of the massive pyrite seems required for such a flood of iron. Another, more unsettling hypothesis stems from folklore. The locals tell of a battle fought on the lake's frozen surface centuries ago, when a clan of raiders was slaughtered and their blood poured into the water, cursing it forever. Some claim that the lake's blood is not iron at all but a rare, naturally occurring pigment produced by a type of extremophile algae that thrives in the lake's low-oxygen, high-metal environment. This algae, invisible to the naked eye, would release a crimson pigment when disturbed, turning the whole basin into a living, breathing scar. What deep, hidden process could bind iron, microbes, and light into a tableau that looks like a wound in the earth? The mystery deepens when night falls and the lake's surface reflects a crimson moon, the glow intensifying as if the water itself were alive. Researchers who have camped on its shore report a faint humming, a low vibration that seems to emanate from the depths, a sound that has no clear source in wind or water movement. The truth remains elusive, and perhaps it will never be fully uncovered. Whether the red waters are a toxic curse of unseen chemicals, a biological marvel, or a lingering echo of an ancient tragedy, the lake continues to draw the curious and the fearful alike. As the wind whistles through the surrounding pines, the lake stands still, a scarred mirror, daring anyone to look beyond the color and confront the enigma that lies beneath. The wind that sweeps across the crags of the Scottish Highlands carries more than the scent of peat and the distant echo of bagpipes. It carries a sound that has baffled locals for centuries, a low, resonant hum that seems to rise from the very rock itself. Deep in the remote valley of Glen Albyn, near the ancient stone circle of Callanish, lies a field of massive granite slabs known to the few who still tend the land as the Singing Stones. By day they appear ordinary, their surfaces pitted by centuries of weather, their edges softened by lichen. Yet at twilight, when the sky turns a bruised violet and the first stars pierce the gloom, a subtle vibration begins, as if the stones were exhaling a mournful sigh. First recorded in the journals of a 19th-century clergyman, Reverend James MacDonald, the phenomenon was dismissed as the wind through the heather, but subsequent accounts from shepherds, hunters, and even a Royal Geographical Society expedition in 1928 describe the same uncanny tone, steady, almost melodic, lasting for several minutes before fading into the night. Some observers claim the notes rise in pitch when the tide of the nearby Loch Broom swells, while others swear they sync with the lunar cycle, reaching a crescendo on a full moon. Scientists have offered a handful of theories, none of which can fully explain the consistency of the sound. One hypothesis suggests the granite contains natural quartz veins that, when subjected to subtle temperature changes after sunset, expand and contract, creating a faint acoustic resonance. Another, more speculative idea points to the presence of underground water channels that, under the pressure of the night's cooling air, generate vibrations that travel through the rock. Yet when geologists placed sensitive seismometers on the stones in 2015, the instruments recorded no measurable movement, even as the audible hum persisted for those standing nearby. Local folklore adds a darker layer to the mystery. The Highlanders tell of a song of the spirits that lures the unwary into the mist, a warning from the ancient Picts who once guarded these lands. Some legends claim the stones are the petrified remains of a lost druidic choir, their voices forever trapped in stone. A handful of old manuscripts, uncovered in a ruined kirk on the Isle of Skye, contain a cryptic verse that reads, "When the stone sings, the earth remembers," hinting at a forgotten ritual that may have bound sound to stone. What remains undeniable is the sensation that passes over those who hear the hum, a chill that crawls up the spine, a feeling of being watched by something older than the hills themselves. The Singing Stones continue to stand in silent vigil, their secret locked within the granite, waiting for a mind capable of hearing what the world refuses to explain. The question lingers, hanging in the night air like a note that refuses to resolve. Are the stones merely a natural curiosity, or do they hold a fragment of a lost language spoken by the very earth? What if a stone slab, carved 3 millennia ago, could name constellations that modern astronomers only uncovered in the last few decades? In the arid highlands of the Syrian desert, archaeologists uncovered a limestone tablet, its surface scarred by the relentless wind, yet astonishingly intact. Its provenance dates back to around 1200 BCE, a period when the Bronze Age kingdoms of the Levant were thriving, trading amber, copper, and myths across the ancient world. The tablet bears a series of meticulously etched symbols, rows of dots, spirals, and angular marks that have long puzzled scholars. At first glance, they appear to be a primitive tally, perhaps a calendar or a record of harvests. But when Dr. Layla Haddad, a specialist in archaeoastronomy, aligned the incisions with the night sky, a pattern emerged that sent chills through the academic community. Each cluster of symbols corresponds to a recognizable asterism: the familiar arc of Orion, the bright triangle of the Summer Triangle, and most strikingly, an arrangement that matches the faint, remote constellation of Lyra's hidden companion, a dim dwarf star only identified by the European Southern Observatory in 2015. The tablet also includes a series of 3 dots that line up with the position of a brown dwarf discovered in 2022, a celestial body invisible to the naked eye and invisible to any ancient telescope. Some researchers argue that these matches could be coincidental, the result of pattern-seeking bias. Yet the precision of the alignments, the consistent spacing, and the fact that the tablet lists *27 stellar groups, far more than the known sky of the Bronze Age, suggest a knowledge that defies our current understanding of ancient astronomy. One theory proposes that the tablet is a fragment of a lost astronomical tradition, perhaps handed down from an even older, pre-Sumerian culture that possessed sophisticated observational techniques. Another hypothesis, more speculative, hints at a cultural exchange with travelers from a distant, now vanished civilization who might have possessed advanced star mapping tools. No written records from the era describe such capabilities, and the tablet's origin remains shrouded in mystery. The stone bears a simple inscription at its base, a phrase that translates roughly as "the heavens speak to those who listen." Whether it is a poetic reminder of humanity's eternal curiosity or a coded instruction to locate hidden stars, the tablet stands as a silent testament to a time when the night sky was both a map and a mystery. As we stare at the same constellations that once guided shepherds and kings, the question lingers. Did our ancestors truly chart the unseen, or have we simply projected our modern knowledge onto ancient stone? The answer remains as elusive as the faint stars etched upon that 3,000-year-old slab, deep beneath the snow-capped spine of the Andes, where the wind howls through jagged passes and ancient spirits are said to linger. A hollow the size of a cathedral was uncovered by a team of geologists who were merely mapping a series of seismic anomalies. The first question that haunted the explorers was simple yet chilling. How could such a vast, perfectly rectangular void exist untouched for millennia, hidden beneath layers of rock, ice, and myth? The chamber, measuring roughly 120 meters in length, 70 meters in width, and soaring up to 30 meters high, is lined with smooth, almost polished basalt walls that reflect a faint, amber glow from mineral veins running like veins of fire through the stone. No natural process, no volcanic vent, no glacial meltwater, no tectonic fissure, has ever produced a cavity of this scale with such regular geometry. Even the most advanced ground-penetrating radar could not explain its origins, prompting scientists to dig deeper, literally and metaphorically, into the Earth's secret. Inside, the floor is littered with a scattering of stone slabs, each etched with symbols that resemble a hybrid of pre-Incan quipu knots and unfamiliar glyphs. Some of these markings align with known astronomical cycles, while others defy any known language, hinting at a culture that may have possessed a knowledge of the heavens lost to history. Adjacent to the walls, researchers found shallow depressions that once held massive wooden beams, now long decayed, suggesting the space may have supported a roof or a platform. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal fragments recovered from a sealed corner placed the last human activity at roughly 200 years ago, a period when the Inca Empire was still a distant memory and the region was populated by nomadic hunter-gatherers. Yet the craftsmanship of the stonework and the sheer scale of the chamber imply an organized labor force far beyond what those peoples could muster. Some scholars argue it could be the remnants of a forgotten civilization that predated the known Andean cultures, perhaps a society that vanished before any written record could survive. Adding to the enigma, acoustic tests performed inside the cavern revealed an extraordinary resonance, a low, humming tone that persists even after the external noise has been silenced. The frequency matches none of the natural frequencies of the surrounding rock, leading to speculation that the chamber was engineered to amplify sound, perhaps for ritual chanting, communication across distances, or even unknown technological purposes. One hypothesis, proposed by a small group of archaeologists, suggests the chamber acted as a gigantic sound vault, a place where vibrations could be stored or transmitted, a concept that seems both eerie and plausible. The discovery has ignited fierce debate across the academic world. Some geologists posit a massive, ancient lava tube that collapsed and resolidated, forming the chamber's walls, while others point to the precision of the cuts as evidence of deliberate quarrying. Indigenous legends from nearby Quechua communities speak of a great mouth of the earth that swallows the sun at the solstice, a myth that now feels unsettlingly close to the reality uncovered beneath the mountains. As night falls over the Andes and the wind carries whispers through the high passes, the chamber remains a silent sentinel, its mysteries sealed within stone. What hands carved its walls? What purpose did its echoing halls serve? And what other secrets lie deeper still, waiting for the earth to give them up? The answers remain hidden, but the echo of that low hum still lingers in the minds of those who dared to descend, reminding us that beneath even the most familiar landscapes, the world still guards shadows we have yet to understand. The desert of southern Peru stretches for miles, an endless sea of ochre sand broken only by the occasional wind-carved ridge. From the air, the ground erupts into a silent galaxy of giant figures, monsters with elongated snouts, spiraling trapezoids, and perfect geometric panels that can only be seen from above. They are the Nazca lines, the world's most enigmatic geoglyphs, carved more than 2,000 years ago by a people whose language and rituals have long since faded. But there is a question that has haunted scholars and sky watchers alike. Why do many of these massive designs line up with a constellation that no longer glitters in the night sky? When the first satellite images were examined in the 1970s, researchers noticed a startling pattern. The hummingbird points its beak toward a cluster of stars that, in the present sky, is barely discernible. Yet if you rewind the heavens to roughly 400 BCE, when the Nazca culture flourished, those very stars formed a bright, unmistakable shape known to modern astronomers as the Southern Dragon. Some scholars argue that this celestial figure was a vital component of Nazca cosmology, a guiding beacon for their priests during seasonal rites. Others suggest a more practical purpose. The lines could have acted as a massive astronomical calendar, marking the moments when the sun rose or set over the hidden constellation, signaling the time to sow maize or begin water rituals in the arid basin. The alignment is not perfect, but it is precise enough to raise eyebrows. Using computer models that account for precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, the hummingbird, aligns within a few degrees of the dragon's apex at the winter solstice. This coincidence would have been invisible to the naked eye from the ground, yet visible to a priest standing atop a modest platform, watching the horizon as the first light brushed the dunes. The Nazca could have used the lines as a kind of terrestrial observatory, a way to project the heavens onto the earth itself, bridging the gap between the divine and the mortal. What remains unsettling is the absence of any written record explaining the purpose of these alignments. The Nazca left behind only fragments of pottery and the occasional burial shroud, none of which contain a clear astronomical treatise. Some archaeologists propose that the lines were part of a secretive priesthood, knowledge guarded so fiercely that it was never transcribed. Others point to oral tradition, now lost to time, that may have spoken of a sky dragon that guided the spirits of the dead across the afterlife. So as the sun sinks behind the distant Andes, casting long shadows over the etched figures, one cannot help but wonder, were the Nazca merely painting for the gods, or were they mapping a forgotten constellation that still watches over the desert, waiting for someone to decipher its silent, celestial code? The answer remains buried beneath the same sand that has hidden these mysteries for millennia. What could a perfectly smooth, obsidian black slab, half a meter long and as heavy as a small car, be doing, perfectly preserved, buried for millennia beneath the frozen heart of Siberia? The answer is nowhere in the textbooks, and it is this unsettling mystery that has drawn scientists, historians, and the curious alike to the remote village of Kobylsk, where the monolith was unearthed in the summer of 2022. The object was discovered by a team of geologists mapping permafrost retreat after an unusually warm spring melted a section of ancient tundra. Their drills struck something hard, unmoving, and unmistakably artificial. When the ice gave way, a gleaming black surface emerged, reflecting the pale daylight like a mirror set in stone. Its edges were razor-sharp, its geometry flawless, a perfect rectangular prism, dimensions roughly 52 cm by 37 cm by 14 cm, with no visible seams, joints, or tool marks. The material itself defied easy classification. Spectroscopic analysis showed a composition of carbon-rich minerals, but the density was far greater than any known natural formation from the region. Local folklore immediately sprang to life. Some elders whispered of the stone of the northern spirits, a relic said to guard the land against unseen forces. Others recalled a Soviet-era rumor about a secret laboratory hidden in the Ural Mountains, where experimental materials were tested for durability in extreme cold. Yet, no archival record mentions such an experiment, and the monolith bears no markings, inscriptions, or serial numbers. Radiocarbon dating of organic matter adhering to the slab placed its burial somewhere between 300 and 600 years ago, predating the rise of the first known Siberian settlements. This pushes the mystery back into the Bronze Age, a time when nomadic tribes roamed these steppes, leaving behind only scattered burial mounds and petroglyphs. Could a forgotten culture have possessed the knowledge to forge such a monolith, or is it a remnant of a lost, perhaps even pre-human, civilization that once thrived in these icy wastes? Scientists have proposed several theories. One hypothesis suggests the slab is a product of a natural meteoritic event, an iron-rich meteorite that, upon cooling, formed a glassy, basaltic exterior. However, isotopic testing has shown the element ratios do not match any known meteorite class. Another, more speculative idea links the monolith to the enigmatic Kolyma anomaly, a series of underground magnetic disturbances recorded in the early 20th century, hinting that the slab might be a conductor or a component of an ancient geophysical device. As the summer thaw receded, the monolith was carefully extracted and placed in a climate-controlled chamber at the Institute of Geology in Yakutsk. Researchers continue to probe its surface with electron microscopes, hoping to catch a faint imprint, a micro-etching, or a hidden pattern that could reveal its purpose. Until then, the black monolith remains a silent sentinel, a dark question pressed into the frozen earth, an object that challenges our assumptions about what ancient peoples could create, and whether some secrets of the planet are still waiting, buried in ice, to be uncovered. What if a piece of parchment, drawn centuries before anyone set foot in the frozen South, could prove that ancient peoples knew a continent that modern explorers would not discover until the 19th century? The question haunts scholars who have stared at the faint, weathered lines of the so-called Piri Reis map, a world chart compiled in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer. On its lower edge, beyond the familiar coastlines of South America, the ink forms a jagged, ice-bound shoreline that looks unsettlingly like the outline of Antarctica. How could a map created only a few decades after Columbus possibly contain a representation of a land that would not be officially sighted until 1820? The map itself is a mosaic of older sources. Piri Reis himself claimed to have copied from a set of very ancient charts, some of which were said to be of Phoenician or even earlier origin. The southernmost region of the chart, however, does not match any known coastline of the 16th century world. Its contours are broken, the pen strokes uneven, as if the cartographer attempted to sketch a coast that was largely unknown, perhaps glimpsed through rumor or the fragments of a lost tradition. Modern researchers have examined the parchment with infrared imaging and multispectral analysis, confirming that the southern outline was indeed part of the original ink layer, not a later addition or a careless smudge. Some geologists argue that the coast corresponds to a period when Antarctica's ice sheet was thinner, exposing a rocky rim that would have looked dramatically different from today's white expanse. If that hypothesis holds, the map would be portraying a coastline that existed roughly 6,000 years ago, when a milder climate might have allowed coastal settlements or at least occasional voyages. Skeptics, however, point out that the Antarctic shape could be a misinterpretation of South America's southern tip, distorted by the limited knowledge of the era. Others suggest that the outline is simply a decorative flourish, a way for the cartographer to fill empty space on the page. Yet the persistent curiosity lies in the map's enigmatic margin, a series of cryptic symbols and a Latin inscription that reads, "Here lies the great southern land, unknown to most, yet spoken of by the elders." No contemporary source explains these words, and no other European map of the time shows a comparable depiction. The debate remains unresolved. Some historians propose that the ancient sources Piri Reis referenced were the remnants of a maritime tradition passed down from the Thule peoples, whose seafaring reach may have extended far beyond the Arctic. Others entertain the tantalizing possibility that an unknown civilization once possessed the means to navigate the treacherous southern oceans, only to vanish without a trace, leaving behind a solitary clue etched in ink. Until a definitive answer emerges, the southern edge of the Piri Reis map sits like a frozen scar on the parchment, an invitation to wonder, a reminder that the Earth still guards secrets beneath its ice. What other lost charts, buried in forgotten archives, might one day reveal a world that our ancestors knew, but we have yet to understand? The mystery lingers, as cold and inexorable as the Antarctic wind itself. Deep beneath the cracked, salt-stained crust of the Gobai's most desolate valleys, the wind whispers a name that has haunted nomads for centuries: the Mongolian deathworm, or *Algoi*. Travelers speak of a creature that can strike a man from 100 meters away, delivering a lethal electric shock or a burst of poisonous venom. Yet, for all the terror it inspires, the most compelling clue to its existence may not be a sighting at all, but a set of mysterious footprints that appear after a sudden, unexplained death. The first recorded accounts of these tracks come from the early 20th century explorer Roy Chapman Harris, who, while charting the dunes near the Gashun-Kushu Basin, stumbled upon a series of shallow depressions that stretched in a perfect, unbroken line for nearly 300 meters. Unlike the deep, irregular prints left by camels or the clawed marks of desert foxes, these impressions were uniform, about 12 centimeters wide, only a few centimeters deep, and spaced precisely 3 to 4 centimeters apart. Local herders, who have lived alongside the desert for generations, told Harris that the tracks appeared only after a sudden, inexplicable death of livestock or a lone traveler, and vanished without a trace by sunrise. Since then, dozens of similar trackways have been reported by scientists, geologists, and even skeptical journalists. In 1994, a Russian research team led by Dr. Alina Kurova documented a set of footprints near the Bayanzeg, flaming cliffs, that matched Harris's description to the millimeter. The team photographed the prints, measured their depth, and collected surrounding soil samples. The analysis revealed a high concentration of sodium chloride and trace amounts of potassium, elements that could, in theory, conduct a potent electric discharge. Moreover, the soil exhibited an unusual pattern of microfractures, as if something had sliced through it with a blade-like motion, yet left no physical residue. Critics argue that the tracks could be the work of wind-carved sand ridges or the result of a rare phenomenon known as desert mirages that temporarily distort surface textures. Some propose that the footprints are simply the result of a burrowing desert snake or a previously unknown species of sand skink, whose elongated bodies could leave a linear imprint. Others point out that the recorded deaths accompanying the prints are often linked to dehydration, heatstroke, or snakebite, common hazards in the Gobi that could be misattributed to a mythical beast. Nevertheless, the consistency of the footprints, uniform width, precise spacing, and the strange electrical properties of the surrounding soil keeps the legend alive. If a creature does indeed glide beneath the dunes, its mode of locomotion would have to be unlike any known reptile or mammal. Some hypothesize a semi-aquatic, mucus-coated organism that can burrow at high speed, generating frictional heat and static electricity. Others suggest a creature that moves by crawling on a low-frequency vibration, leaving behind only these faint, regular depressions. The truth remains buried beneath the endless sands, waiting for a single, undeniable encounter. Until a body or a live specimen is recovered, the footprints stand as the most tangible, yet still enigmatic, evidence of the death worm's existence. They are a silent invitation to the curious and the brave. Step into the Gobi, follow the line of the unknown, and perhaps discover whether the legend is a living predator or merely a phantom born of fear and the unforgiving desert. Imagine a world where the strange stone circles of Britain, the perfectly cut basalt columns of the Sahara, the massive earthen walls of the Amazon, and the cryptic petroglyphs etched into the cliffs of Patagonia are not isolated curiosities, but fragments of a single, forgotten tapestry, a global civilization that once spanned continents long before recorded history took its first breath. We begin with the megalithic alignments at Stonehenge, whose precise solstitial calculations rival modern astronomy. Yet only a few hundred kilometers away, the mysterious Karnak stones of Brittany stand in rows that echo the same celestial intent. Some researchers have noted a striking similarity in the tool marks, suggesting that the same hands, or at least the same techniques, shaped both sites. Travel southward across the desert, and the eye is drawn to the enigmatic Nabta-playa, a prehistoric complex of stone circles and pathways that align with the summer solstice and the rising of the star Sirius. Its age, roughly 7,000 years, predates Stonehenge by millennia, but the shared language of stone and sky hints at a common cultural thread. Further east, the basaltic columns of the Tadrart, a cactus in Libya, rise like the ribs of a colossal, petrified beast. Their uniformity is astonishing. Each block is cut with a precision that defies the simple stone working tools we associate with nomadic peoples of the era. Satellite imagery reveals a network of similar formations stretching across the Sahara, forming a hidden lattice that some call the Saharan Grid. Cross the Atlantic and you encounter the Amazon's geoglyphs, vast geometric earthworks, some spanning hundreds of meters, visible only from the air. These designs, carved with astonishing accuracy, mirror the geometry of European megalithic sites, yet they were created by peoples who, according to conventional archaeology, never possessed the means for such large-scale earth-moving. On the Pacific coast of South America, the Nazca lines whisper another clue. These massive geoglyphs, only discernible from above, depict animals, spirals, and straight lines that intersect with astonishing precision. Some of the motifs echo symbols found on the walls of the Saddle Huruk settlement in Anatolia, suggesting a visual language that traveled far beyond the limits of any known ancient trade route. Even the underwater realm offers its own riddles. Off the coast of Japan lies the Yonaguni Monument, a submerged staircase of massive stone slabs that some argue is a remnant of a sunken city. Its angular cuts and right angles are eerily reminiscent of the dry stone walls of the ancient city of Jericho, one of the world's oldest known settlements. What binds these disparate marvels together? One theory proposes that a seafaring people, adept at navigating the ancient oceans, spread a shared architectural and astronomical knowledge across the globe. Another hypothesis points to a cataclysm, perhaps a massive volcanic eruption or a sudden climatic shift, that erased the cultural memory, leaving only stone, sand, and echoing symbols behind. We cannot ignore the cryptic scripts that appear on these sites. The Rongorongo glyphs of Easter Island, the undeciphered Indus Valley signs, and the enigmatic Vinca symbols of the Balkans each share a visual rhythm, a series of repeated motifs that hint at a common proto-writing system, long before the rise of Sumerian cuneiform. If all these anomalies are indeed pieces of a lost global civilization, what does that mean for our understanding of human progress? It would suggest that early societies possessed a degree of coordination, technological skill, and shared worldview far beyond what conventional timelines allow. The silence of history becomes a deafening void, filled only by the cold stone and the stubborn lines etched into the earth, waiting for us to hear the story they still refuse to tell.